What does mukbang mean in like the originating language? Does it just sound like eating?
Mukbang means eating show. Oh, apparently there's a newer variety out called cookbangs, which is a cooking show where they cook a whole bunch and then eat all of it.
Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
It is our basic human right to be fuck-up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Put chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis.
Hello, occultists. I am Richard Bigley, and in studio with me today, I have
Sageberry,
Ood Gallifrey.
I'm the soundboard demon.
I'm Chris.
This is Miriam.
And Miriam actually is going to be joining me to present the election and all the fuckery that happened afterwards. So before we get into that, I just want to set the stage. It's early November. The USA has reached just over 230,000 COVID deaths. Just for some perspective, that's 76 9/11s. Black Lives Matter has captured the nation's attention, and it was met with a flood of police brutality. A Supreme Court justice has just been shoehorned into the Supreme Court. On one side, a candidate, a corrupt proto-authoritarian with fascist tendencies, says, quote,
"Win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election? Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?"
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it. And you know who knows it better than anybody else? The Democrats know it better than anybody else. Go ahead.
Mr. President, the second question is, will you...
Please, go ahead.
Why won't
you asked the question.
Why won't you...
when he is asked if he will accept the results of the election. On the other side, a right-leaning neoliberal, with his own record of corruption, creepy behavior, and reprehensible political decisions that had dire consequences, but he's slightly preferable to the proto-fascist. That's right. Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. The year is 2020. The winner gets the White House and the job of president. Game on. But first, what's your poison?
So, what's your poison?
Well, at the start of this recording night, I was drinking day-old coffee. And now I'm drinking day-old coffee that's gone cold. I'm still not sure if I'm going to be okay. I'm going to lower my rating to a 3 out of 10, but it contains the caffeine that I crave, so I'm going to continue to drink it.
Well, now I am drinking some Great West Pilsner, and I am eating some Subway.
My Diet Coke is empty, and I found out today that I don't have any beer in the fridge, so now I am just staring into the abyss.
I'm silently gargling sadness. It's a little tangy.
Vaping my favorite mix of CBD and some kind of fancy British Earl Grey kind of thing. I don't even remember what the kind of a vape juice this is, but anyway, they ran out of my favorite shisha vape juice, which apparently I'm some sort of 100-year-old Egyptian man on the inside, so when it's too hot to actually break out the real shisha, I just vape shisha all day inside in the air conditioning.
I also have the soul of a 100-year-old Egyptian man, but I keep it in a bottle on my desk.
And I'm always the old school molasses tobacco flavor. It's pretty great. One of my friends is Lebanese, and I went over to his place once, and I was like, "Hey, I brought the shisha," and he goes, "Oh wow, hey, is this tobacco still good? It tastes weird." I'm like, "Yeah, it's the molasses flavor," and he goes, "Oh, I thought this was just like fancy apple flavor that went bad." I was like, "No, I'm a 1,000-year-old Egyptian man. I don't do fancy flavors."
I love
when
that.
we get back together after this whole pandemic and I get to see you and the plague is gone, we should do a What's Your Poison with my hookah, and we could like do some raspberry shisha.
Nice.
I broke my hookah a year ago, and I haven't done anything to replace it.
Oh no.
So I would like to use your hookah, Richard Bigley.
As long as someone can drive me home.
Yeah. Well, I live in Texas, so we don't legally get to put anything cool in ours. Legally, wink, wink.
Yeah, you live pretty close to me, Sage. I can probably like toss you home.
Like a caber toss or something, you know?
Just
Exactly.
yeet.
Just yeet out the airlock like on Among Us.
Yeah, practice standing tall and stiff. That way you will travel further.
So the stage has been set.
This does not look like a second place finish. I saw Sleepy Joe. He had about 12 people and unable to fill up his circles. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. This is a nice rowdy crowd, isn't it, huh? Only in Pennsylvania. Oh, look at all of the fake news. Look at all of the fake news. Hey, David, turn the mic up. Turn the mic up. Spent $48 million. They found no collusion. They committed treason. They tried to take out a duly elected president, and we caught them. We caught them. Then they say, oh, wouldn't it be nice? I'm a nice guy. I have to fight. Wait, I have to fight. I have to fight to protect me and to protect you. Because once I'm not here, there's nobody else to protect you. That I can tell you. But they gave a beautiful, you have to understand, everything's relative. They gave a beautiful, beautiful editorial, and I appreciate it. Oh! Thank you. It's the first time, thank you. Thank you. Telling you, you're going to make me cry with that. Stop. And the tech and the media will not, wait, the media will not, this is actually a very big moment in the history of our country. Fund your Philadelphia police. Have you seen that? They actually wanted to fund.
Look, we've been through a lot in this country since we announced. America's facing a confluence of crises unlike anything in living memory. We're still in the battle for the soul of America. Decency, honor, respect. Where has it gone with this president? But let me tell you something, folks. Tomorrow's the beginning of a new day. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that has left hard-working Americans out in the cold. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that has divided this nation and fanned the flames of hate. Tomorrow, we can put an end to a presidency that has failed to protect this nation. Ladies and gentlemen, millions of Americans have already voted, close to 100 million, and millions more will vote tomorrow. And my message to you is simple. The power to change this country is in your hands. In your hands. I don't care how hard Donald Trump tries. There's nothing that's going to stop the people of this nation from voting. Period. And when America votes, America will be heard. And America's heard. I believe the message will be loud and clear. It's time for Donald Trump to pack his bags and go home. I honest to God believe the vast majority of Americans are done with the chaos, the corruption, the failure, the irresponsibility, the indifference to American lives, the indifference to America's dignity. We've got a lot of work to do. Not division and distraction, but real healing of this country. If you elect me your president, I'm going to heal this country, and we're going to act. We're going to act to get COVID under control beginning on day one. And here's the amazing thing. Here's the amazing thing about this moment in our history. The character of the country is on the ballot. On the one hand, we're facing the biggest threats to who we are and what we believe that we've seen in our lifetimes. But on the other hand, our future has never been more promising. I've said it many times. I'm more optimistic about America's future today than I was when I got invited and got elected as a 29-year-old kid.
November 3rd, America goes to vote. Miriam, not to put you on the spot, but did you vote this year?
Yeah, I did. I actually did early voting, and my husband and I both early voted.
Could you explain briefly like what your experience was at the poll? Like, could you, like, I'm a Canadian. I don't know what it's like down there, but like, was there tension? Did it seem to be like as combative as like a lot of media would have you believe?
In our area specifically, it wasn't really combative. We live outside of Houston, and it's it's probably more combative in Houston just because it's a lot bigger area. But where I live, I live right next to a cow pasture that's right next to a big shopping center, so it's kind of different. It's like mixed development. I haven't really finished developing this into real suburbs. So the lines for early voting were crazy, though. It was like everybody came out to vote. And the way it works is that you can't do electioneering when you're voting. So that means that you can't wear like Trump for president shirts or Biden for president hats or something like that. And so nobody was wearing any of that stuff when they were voting. And the voting in the polling place where I was, I like to go there just because it's not really that crowded. But even so, there were still lines around the block just to go vote. So when you went to vote, it was pretty straightforward. We have the electronic machines, you know, the ones with the little demons inside that magically change your vote from Donald Trump to Joe Biden.
I will have you know that is a well-established tradition among my people. We've been doing it for thousands of years, and you just made it easier with the electronic voting.
Soundboard demon. Did Hugo Chavez put the demons in the voting machine? I've heard rumors.
We've been doing it since, like, voting's been a thing, buddy. It's fine.
Yeah. Actually, I'm pretty sure I saw the ghost of Hugo Chavez in our polling place, but I couldn't be sure, so...
Maybe it was just a 100-year-old Egyptian man.
From what I understand, like there was a good amount of voter suppression efforts, like both the regular sort of kind, like in some states you have to show a certain kind of ID, and that ID can be hard for some people to get, especially, you have to have all your paperwork in a row. Sometimes you have to have an address. Sometimes you have to have a phone number, and disadvantaged people don't always have stuff like that. And ex-convicts not being allowed to vote, reduction of polling places. Did you like? I saw a couple things that suggested that there were kind of extra efforts, like polling places being reduced and things to that nature.
Right. So in Harris County, they allowed for early voting, drive-through voting, and ballot drop-off boxes. But Harris County is huge, and it's got a really big area that it encompasses. So there was one ballot drop-off box for Harris County, and let me look up how big Harris County is for you, because it's so okay, so Harris County has like 4.7 million people in it, and it's got almost 1.8 thousand square miles, and there was one ballot drop-off location for mail-in ballots.
What?
That's nuts. Like
that's fucking insane.
That's definitely like a voter suppression technique, is to just make it so fucking inconvenient for anybody to try to vote.
How big is Saskatoon? What's our population?
250,000. So like
if we had one drop box, that would be fucking nuts. And Christ.
Well, let's take Texas, for example. I try to be as kind as I can be, but I have got to say that the decision by Governor Abbott in Texas to limit the vote drop-off boxes to one per county, when some counties have very little population, and Harris County, the Houston area, has millions of people, as you mentioned. One drop box for votes. Isn't it obvious? Harris County, Houston is a Democratic area. It'll produce a big margin for Democrats, assuming people are actually able to vote.
So you're talking voter suppression?
That is voter suppression. Nobody is going to prove otherwise. That is voter suppression, underlined 10 times.
Given all that we've heard, what should voters expect, Larry, on election night?
Given that a good piece of the voting will be done ahead of time, but can't be opened in many states until the polls close at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or whenever they close locally, you're going to have all of those paper ballots first taken out of the envelopes in some states. Others will have already done that. But then count it, sent through a machine. Maybe partisans will want to double check. There's simply no way to do it quickly when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of ballots in some states, millions and millions across the country. So people who want an election night need to remember that if there's not a landslide, then you're talking about election week. And let's just all pray it doesn't go beyond a week.
In absence of a landslide, as you put it, what are your concerns about how candidates may react?
Oh, I'm very concerned, particularly, to be honest, about President Trump at the national level and some state candidates who are going to take the voting day, November 3rd voting, which will probably be released first in most states, and use that to claim victory when, in fact, the election day vote is going to be very substantially Republican. The pre-election vote is going to be very substantially Democratic, but it won't all be counted until the next day or later in the week. So if you're a Republican candidate or you're President Trump, you go out there and declare victory, then your supporters will think that any attempt to count the other votes and to make the election go the other way is voter fraud, which is malarkey, but we all know that people are gullible.
Professor Sabato from UVA, thank you.
And it's weird when I see voters lined up outside of polling stations, because I think to every election I've ever voted in, it's been I've kind of walked in. I mean, the lineup may be maybe 10 people, but by no means are we lined up for blocks for hours to vote, you know? And
No.
it's just, when I see that, to me, it seems like it's a poorly run system, in the sense that, you know, if you had, you know, way more polling stations and people could vote a lot closer to where they live, then you would end up, you know, with, you know, without having all these people disenfranchised. And
yeah.
But
Harrison County
and then you
twice as many people as Toronto does.
Jesus.
Fuck. And they have
like
one
2
Dropbox.
Torontos and they have 1 Dropbox. Wow.
Yeah,
that's literally mind-boggling. Yes.
And then, like, when you factor in like them like demolishing a bunch of the mail sorting machines leading up to the election, you know, when mailing ballots would be a big deal, you know. It was certainly seems like a coordinated effort if I were a conspiracy-minded individual.
I'm kind of with that one.
The U.S. Postal Service is discarding hundreds of high-speed mail sorting machines from processing facilities, months before the demand for mail-in ballots is expected to surge. It's also removing some of its iconic blue mailboxes from streets across the country. Concern is rising for the cash-strapped federal agency. The president has railed against it, and postal unions fear mail is intentionally being slowed, when efficient processing is more needed than ever for the election. The fleet of multi-million-dollar machines are said to process as many as 35,000 pieces of mail per hour, and it comes amid a postal service overhaul that's left mail piled up at facilities.
We take our obligation seriously, and I was raised in the postal system. You never delayed mail. So these are very troubling changes.
Last week, in a letter to Democratic lawmakers, the Postal Service flagged it might be shifting or removing equipment to maximize efficiency. Dozens of Democrats this week sent a letter to the new Postmaster General, urging him not to take any actions that could make it harder for Americans to vote.
Will you be bringing back any mail sorting machines that have been removed since you've become Postmaster General? Will any of those come back?
There's no intention to do that. They're not needed, sir.
So you will not bring back any processors?
They're not needed, sir.
So you've already said, though, today that it's not necessary. But look, when we have only one machine that can do a certain kind of sorting in our largest distribution center in the state of New Hampshire, and it breaks and everything has to stop till it gets fixed again, that's not efficient. That delays delivery. You're really sabotaging the Postal Service's ability to sort mail efficiently. And you're undermining postal workers' commitment to that everyday delivery. So will you commit to having your team look into this and get back to me in writing about what the plan is to get at least some of these decommissioned machines back up and running?
Yes. Well, first, Senator, I don't agree with the premise, but I will comply with your request.
It's ridiculous. And I mean, at one point, I don't remember if it was Harris County or if it was Houston proper, but they were doing, I think it was drive-through voting 24 hours a day. So there were people who were literally voting at 3:00 in the morning. And it was because they were like, look, I just got off of my shift work. I'm going to go vote. And that was pretty much the best way that they could get people to vote, because otherwise there are so many people who work odd hours who otherwise wouldn't be voting. And of course, you know, you have a bunch of shitbags like, oh, well, you know, if you really wanted to vote, you'd take a day off of work or you'd vote on your lunch break. And it's like some people, they live on one side of town and they work on the other side of town. And the running gag is that Houston is an hour away from Houston. And it's true. One side of Houston is like an hour away from the other side. And that's if you're not hitting traffic.
Well, and then you like look at the gerrymandered districts, you know, like they aren't nice squares or any sort of like reasonable geometric shape. Like they carefully cut which neighborhoods along which areas to, you know, to make a district to ensure, you know, certain outcomes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you may be across the street from that district. Like you may be closer to one polling station than the polling station you're required to vote at. And that just seems so nuts to me. I don't know.
No, it's ridiculous. And they do the same with the schools that you're zoned to. Like people will be zoned to, they'll live across the street from one school and they'll be zoned to a school that's like 5 miles away. It's ridiculous. But yeah, Dan Crenshaw, our eye patch representative, he's got a district where I think everybody I know in Houston is just barely in his district, and he's got one of those that looks like
like a duck. It looks like a duck.
It looks like somebody threw a wad of yarn on the floor and was just like, yeah, that's how we're going to have our district shaped. Just however it lands.
Can we just back up for a second? What do you mean eye patch person?
So Dan Crenshaw had he was a former Navy SEAL, and he was in, I think, Afghanistan, and his squad got hit by a roadside bomb or something. Anyway, he got shrapnel in his eye and they had to take his eye out, and so now he wears an eye patch. And what's his name? Pete David. He got made fun of by that guy on Saturday Night Live.
Here with his first impressions of some of the candidates is Pete Davidson.
Hey, Chad. So this guy's kind of cool. Dan Crenshaw.
Oh, come on, man.
Yo, hold on. You may be surprised to hear he's a congressional candidate from Texas and not a hitman in a porno movie. I'm sorry. I know he lost his eye in war or whatever. Whatever. Yeah. All right. Well, here's a Democrat, so I look fair. Give me that, like, Cuomo guy. There he is. All right.
I don't know. It seems like a lot of people that get elected as Republicans, like especially somebody like Dan Crenshaw, like so much of his like votership seems to be about him, like appearing as this like super masculine, like a veteran guy. Like it's all about like that projection and presentation. I wonder if he could have done it without the eye patch. I wonder that.
Yeah.
And also, just an aside, like in Canada, we get time, like our employer has to give us an time off to go vote during the election. Right?
3 hours, I believe it is, federally and provincially.
Yeah, like you have to. Yeah, like you have to have a set amount of time off. So all this voting on your lunch break stuff, that sounds like.
Well, how do you vote in your lunch break? How do you vote on your lunch break when like you're lined up for 3 blocks, you know? Like that's not reasonable at all.
Can anybody explain to me why in 2020 it still takes you 6, 7, 8 hours just to vote? How, can somebody please explain to me, in 2020, all this advanced technology we got, all of the wonderful things that this country possesses, do we feel it's coincidental that in 2020, it still takes you 6, 7, 8, some cases 12 hours to cast your vote?
Right.
So Miriam, what happened in the election then?
What didn't happen in the election? Oh my God. So, okay. Locally, as far as going to actually vote, it's pretty straightforward. You go to your polling place. I have my Texas driver's license, which there's a lot of stuff that you can use as a legal ID to vote in Texas. You can use your driver's license, you can use your handgun license, which I also have. It's basically just my driver's license that also has a handgun license instead of driver's license on the top.
That's wild.
That's the most Texas thing I've ever heard. That the second used thing to go vote is not a birth certificate, not a phone bill. It's your handgun license.
Sense made.
Makes sense.
I'm going to do this aside here, but every right-wing person I know goes like, oh, liberals hate guns. They want to take your guns. And I'm like, I live in Texas. Every pinko commie liberal I know owns a gun and knows how to shoot a gun. And where are all these pinko commie liberals that you know hate guns? Like,
If you
we
go
all
far
own
enough
guns.
left, you get your guns back.
I know.
From Marx, under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary.
Exactly.
Gun positive.
160 million Americans voted in the 2020 election. The highest turnout in a century. This is in the middle of a pandemic, the middle of a new civil age rights demonstration, and amongst a political divide that, like, seemed to be tearing the American people, like, more than usual. Like, you guys seemed majorly divided. Like, and yet you had record-breaking turnout.
Right.
Well, it was probably the major divide that kind of fueled that turnout, though.
Yeah, I mean, everybody really wanted to turn out and vote. I mean, Trump managed to pull out another million voters than he did before, but Biden's voters, the Democrats got even more mobilized than they had before.
Soundboard Demon, could you check on the exact number? But somebody named Stacey Abrams actually independently signed up like a giant amount of voters, like new Democrats to vote in the election. And like I remember looking at the numbers of the state that she was involved with. I think like the people she signed up likely turned that election.
Yeah, Stacey Abrams had run for governor in Georgia, and she ultimately lost, but she lost to Brian Kemp, who was the Secretary of State in Georgia, and after she lost, she had set up I don't remember the name of her organization, but it was basically an organization that connected all these various voter organizations that help other people get registered to vote. And so she works with them to kind of centralize all those efforts around Georgia.
Sorry, I'm seeing a whole bunch of different numbers, but I'm seeing that in the last sort of like 9 years, either her or her organization has signed up about 500,000 people in Georgia to vote as Democrats. So I don't know what they said that the electorate went up by about 30% in Georgia.
Okay, I think her team is called Fair Fight. That's right.
Yeah.
One of my friends lives in Georgia, and he had me look them up, and so I make a donation to them every month.
Yeah, so some factors before we go into what happened on voting night. So a lot of these votes were mailed in, which means that there had to be people physically opening the envelopes, validating them, and then feeding them into machines. A lot of people went out to the polls. There were some states where you couldn't vote early and you couldn't mail in, so you had to go in in person on election day to vote. How the American voting system works. It's a common misconception that the winner is the most popular voted candidate. It's not. In 2016, Hillary Clinton got more votes in total than Donald Trump, but she was not the victor that election.
Oh, I also believe in like the 2000 election that like Al Gore also received a higher popular vote than George Bush did, but still Bush ended up getting the position.
5 times in America's history has the less popular voted candidate won. Trump most recently, you're correct. Bush and Gore. Gore actually won the popular vote. Before that was in 1888 with, it just says Cleveland, so I'm assuming it's Grover Cleveland and then some old Harrison type person. Same thing. Won the Electoral College, lost popular vote.
And so if it's not the most popular, then what's producing these wins? Well, it's because technically voters in the U.S. don't directly elect the president. They elect members of something called an Electoral College. And each state has a number of, let's say, points that own them. So, for example, California has 55 of these. Texas has 38. Wyoming has 3. Colorado has 9. Arizona has 11, etc., etc. Every state has a different amount.
The formula, I believe, is 3 electoral college voters plus an amount or a number of voters assigned based on the state's population. So, you can have like 3 people, but if you can make yourself a state, you still get 3 electoral college votes, despite the fact you're basically nothing compared to the rest of the population.
Yeah. And because it's not directly tied to the population, you get weird imbalances in like the power of a person's vote. This is how like people that don't get the popular vote are elected in. Like for example, if you vote in Wyoming, your vote counts approximately 3 times 6 more than if you were to vote in California, just because the amount of like electoral points your state has is more significant than your state's population ought to allot for. And that's what produces these kind of skewed results in the end.
Well, what it was, I believe, the origin of this system came out because it was, they didn't have the ability to like do the massive online connection across the continent. You can't, when they were coming up with how these elections are going to be run, they didn't have fiber optic networks coast to coast. So basically the idea was like, well, we're going to vote all these people and then give them their result. And then they go horseback to Washington, in which they are going to cast their vote at that place. And that is why this system was in place, because it was just easier to kind of like summarize a local area's vote and then say, okay, well, that's how this individual is going to go vote. And then again, they put them on the back of a horse and send them to go vote.
It seems like a lot of antiquated systems like kind of are just resisting change and being held,
Well, I'd actually suggest that I guess, short circuit the electoral college system would be that the electoral college would vote based on the popular vote. So instead of a particular candidate receiving all the electoral college vote, the electoral college voters would vote for a specific, based on the popular vote of the nation. And then you just kind of like make that whole electoral college null and void, because if you have 51% of the popular vote, and you get 51% of the electoral college to vote for you, in every state, and then you just sort of short circuit that, and then you don't actually need to like get a constitutional amendment or anything like that rammed through to eliminate that antiquated system.
There is currently a thing that is going through legislatures of different states called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, or better known as the NIPVIC, where they do exactly
Oh, yeah, it's better known as the NIPVIC.
Yes, the NIPVIC. If they can have states within more than 270 electoral votes, which is the number you have to hit to make the president, if they all agree to this in law, that they will vote for the popular candidate, then they will all together always vote for the popular candidate, which makes the electoral college null and void. Currently, they're waiting for Texas, Missouri, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and South Carolina. Look at me remembering how to do states.
Geez, what's waiting? What are you waiting for, Texas? Holy, get on this.
Yeah, get on the NippleVic.
Get on that NippleVic.
Yeah, and that's another wrench to throw in the gears that kind of Richard sort of alluded to. I believe that depending on the states, some of these electors that are voted in, they can choose to spend their state's points as they wish. Some of them have to go with what the vote tells them to, so some of them are bound to it. But some states, they don't have to. Some states, they can change their mind and vote for somebody else.
Yeah, those are called faithless electors, and I think they're not very common. And actually, a lot of states have laws against faithless electors, and there's not like a national law, but there are states that have laws that allow them to punish faithless electors. Like, I don't remember which states they are though.
Historically, I think there's been less than 200 faithless electors in the entire history of the U.S. electoral system. And I believe a good chunk of these faithless electors had ended up voting for a different candidate because the candidate they were supposed to vote for died before they could cast the vote. So that's one of the things. I think 14 states, never mind, scratch that number. But a lot of the states will null and void the vote of a faithless elector. So you really, I mean, in terms like a lot of people are like, oh, wait till the Electoral College votes. It's not over till it's over and all that stuff. But like a lot of states, and I believe there was like 14 of them that will actually nullify or void the Electoral College vote that was faithlessly voted, and then replace that elector with someone who'll do the fucking job and vote for the right candidate. Some of them will actually enact punishments against the faithless elector for doing so. Some of them will not. Some of them will accept their vote and punish them. Some of them will just accept their vote and not punish them. So it's just a very interesting system how every state is different on how they approach it.
Currently, Oklahoma and that one on the East Coast, what's right below the Mason-Dixon line? I think it's Carolina, I never know. Those ones, you will get a penalty and they void your vote. And in California, the square one next to Texas, and then the one under that one below the Mason-Dixon line on the East Coast. I think that one's Georgia. Those ones you can just go. They'll let you do it.
Yeah.
Texas has no law on whether or not you can be a faithless elector at all.
Texas is a GOP state, and there's pretty much an expectation that you're gonna vote for a Republican.
It also looks like New York State might not have any faithless elector laws.
Yeah. So there, I just looked it up. There are 32 states, and the District of Columbia have laws that are faithless elector laws. Most of the laws are just like $1,000 fine, so it's not like you're gonna go to jail or anything like that. It's just we're gonna inconvenience you.
Oh no, that millionaire will have to pay $1,000 if they completely subvert democracy. We have a place for them down here.
Yeah, well, and I mean, none of the faithless elector votes have ever really influenced an election. Like in 2016, there were some that voted for Colin Powell instead of Hillary Clinton, and somebody voted for an anti-Keystone Pipeline protester. But it's not like anybody was throwing the vote and they suddenly voted for Hillary Clinton instead of Donald Trump. So it wasn't really helping anybody.
Fun fact, faithless electors would actually go to the worst place in hell, which is the ninth circle of treachery.
According to a Twitter poll, I am not going to hell.
Most likely not going to hell.
Most likely not.
There's
going
always
to hell.
a chance.
Well, of course. I'm not sure if you have listened to the podcast and know me, but not necessarily the greatest person.
Yeah.
I mean, well.
So, election night, Tuesday the 3rd. Going into the night, it was kind of all up in the air. Biden was in the lead, but there was lots of pundits that were saying that Trump had the lead to the victory. And but nothing really was set in stone. News coverage of the vote carried well past midnight. A dozen states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, were too close to project a winner. This is because a lot of mail-in ballots weren't allowed to start being counted until Election Day. And even worse than that, some ballots were arriving late, like after Election Day possibly, and they were to be allowed in, which I think is fair. I think all votes should be counted, but it just would add to the amount of time it would take to count everything. So that's why we didn't really know anything Tuesday night.
Good evening. Your patience is commendable. We knew this was going to go long, But who knew we're going to go into maybe tomorrow morning, maybe even longer. But look, we feel good about where we are. We really do. I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it was going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted. But we're feeling good. We're feeling good about where we are. We believe one of the nets has suggested we've already won Arizona, but we're confident about Arizona. That's a turnaround. We also just called it for Minnesota, and we're still in the game in Georgia, although that's not one we expected. And we're feeling real good about Wisconsin and Michigan. And by the way, it's going to take time to count the votes. We're going to win Pennsylvania. Yes. I've been talking to the folks in Philly, Allegheny County, Scranton, and they're really encouraged by the turnout and what they see. Look, you know, we could know the results as early as tomorrow morning, but it may take a little longer. As I've said all along, it's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people. But I'm optimistic about this outcome. And I want to thank every one of you who came out and voted in this election. And by the way, Chris Coons and the Democrats, congratulations here in Delaware.
John Conley.
Pardon me?
John Conley.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank the American people for their tremendous support. Millions and millions of people voted for us tonight. And a very sad group of people is trying to disenfranchise that group of people. And we won't stand for it. For a big celebration. We were winning everything, and all of a sudden it was just called off. The results tonight have been phenomenal. And we are getting ready. I mean, literally, we were just all set to get outside and just celebrate something that was so beautiful, so good. Such a vote, such a success. The citizens of this country have come out in record numbers. This is a record. There's never been anything like it. To support our incredible movement, we won states that we weren't expected to win. Florida, we didn't win it. We won it by a lot. We won the great state of Ohio. We won Texas. We won Texas by 700,000 votes, and they don't even include it in the tabulations. It's also clear that we have won Georgia. We're up by 2.5% or 117,000 votes with only 7% left. They're never going to catch us. They can't catch us. Likewise, we've clearly won North Carolina, where we're up 1.4% or 77,000 votes with only approximately 5% left. They can't catch us. We also, if you look and you see, Arizona, we have a lot of life in that. And somebody declared that it was a victory for, and maybe it will be. I mean, that's possible. But certainly there were a lot of votes out there that we could get because we're now just coming into what they call Trump territory. I don't know what you call it, but these were friendly Trump voters. And that could be overturned. The gentleman that called it, I watched tonight. He said, well, we think it's fairly unlikely that he could catch. Well, fairly unlikely. And we don't even need it. We don't need that. That was just a state that if we would have gotten it, it would have been nice, Arizona. But there's a possibility, maybe even a good possibility. In fact, since I saw that originally, it's been changed and the numbers have substantially come down just in a small amount of votes. So we want that obviously to stay in play. But most importantly, we're winning Pennsylvania by a tremendous amount.
Fox News, however, had put Arizona in Biden's column earlier in the night that Tuesday based on modeling of ballots. At the time of recording, Biden has won Arizona by 11,000 votes. So some of the right-wing networks were trying to call Arizona for Biden, and it drew a great amount of criticism. And then Biden ended up winning anyway. A lot of poll workers work until the middle of the night counting in mail-in votes, and many of them upload the votes they tallied in the middle of the night, right before they signed off their shift. In the morning, a lot of right-wingers immediately start freaking out because they start saying like, oh, overnight, did you see the huge amount of Biden votes that happened when I was sleeping? I was sleeping, so it seems suspicious that they all came in at once.
So super suspicious.
Yeah. And like they didn't account for like a lot of these workers were registering votes in batches after they were done processing a lot of the mail. So that's why it arrived like on the system and was reported to any news outlets and stuff like in batches.
A late night turned into an early morning here in Wisconsin. A lot of folks went to bed thinking President Trump had a strong grasp on the state of Wisconsin, but they woke up to much different news. Around 4 o'clock Central Time Wednesday morning, Wisconsin went from red to blue. And the biggest reason for that change came right here in Milwaukee. After counting all day and night, the city of Milwaukee finalized nearly 170,000 absentee ballots and delivered them to Milwaukee County to be added to the totals. When that happened, Joe Biden surged ahead, overcoming at the time a statewide deficit of more than 100,000 votes.
I'm very confident in our totals.
The 169,519 absentee ballots are a record here in Milwaukee. So understandably, it took a very long time to fully count, nearly 20 hours. Megan Wolf with the Wisconsin Election Commission wholeheartedly stands by the validity of this election.
Elections are such a deliberate, meticulous process where each of our local election officials in our local communities are conducting this process in a public setting. Every piece of data is publicly available.
Following Milwaukee, Biden received an additional bump in votes Wednesday morning from Green Bay and also Kenosha. Biden's lead grew to more than 20,000 votes, with 100% of precincts now reporting.
But of course, fraud and his Trump and his cronies start to call fraud immediately.
Like a little bit of a Freudian slip there.
Definitely like that.
No, I missed it.
You called Donald Trump fraud as though that was like his name.
Fraud and his cronies.
You beautiful stone bastard.
Absolutely wonderful.
My subconscious is speaking truth. Oh no.
See, and for these results and the swaying of election for Joe Biden, I mean, I don't necessarily want us to take credit for the Joe Biden. I just want us to take credit for the loss of Trump. And I think it was probably our Trump episode that swayed a whole bunch of the voters. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure someone's going to start crying foreign interference after our Trump episode, but I'm sorry, that's just the way that it goes, you know.
Canadian hackers.
We're just trying to do our part.
Yeah, we're actually working for Russia. Surprise, haha. No, just kidding.
That's why we're all communists.
Yeah.
Wow.
Niet.
Duże dobre.
So Wednesday the 4th, day after the election day, a bunch of results came in at about 2 p.m. CNN first called Wisconsin one of 3 states that flipped to Trump in 2016 and flipped to Biden in 2020. Everybody noted at the time that the Trump campaign was requesting a recount in the states. Yeah, so you see that when these states that are still pending begin to flip towards Biden, Trump, one by one, as they flip, he starts to call fraud on them, and he starts to organize, start to put out rhetoric about how he's setting up lawsuits and how like it's a hoax, and he starts to put out some of these talking points that you're hearing a lot of his followers and a lot of people on social media and a lot of people at these protests repeating to this day.
I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech. As everybody saw, we won by historic numbers. And the pollsters got it knowingly wrong. They got it knowingly wrong. We had polls that were so ridiculous, and everybody knew it at the time. There was no blue wave that they predicted. They thought there was going to be a big blue wave. That was false. It was done for suppression reasons. But instead, there was a big red wave. As everyone now recognizes, media polling was election interference in the truest sense of that word by powerful special interests. These really phony polls, I have to call them phony polls, fake polls, were designed to keep our voters at home, create the illusion of momentum for Mr. Biden. We were winning in all the key locations by a lot, actually. And then our numbers started miraculously getting whittled away in secret, and they wouldn't allow legally permissible observers. We went to court in a couple of instances, and we were able to get the observers put in. And when the observers got there, they wanted them 60, 70 feet away, 80 feet, 100 feet away, or outside the building to observe people inside the building. And we won a case, a big case, and we have others happening. There are lots of litigation, even beyond our litigation. There's tremendous amount of litigation generally because of how unfair this process was. And I predicted that. I've been talking about mail-in voting for a long time. It's really destroyed our system. It's a corrupt system, and it makes people corrupt even if they aren't by nature. But they become corrupt. It's too easy. They want to find out how many votes they need, and then they seem to be able to find them. They wait, and then they find them. And you see that on election night. We were ahead in vote in North Carolina by a lot, tremendous number of votes. And we're still ahead by a lot, but not as many, because they're finding ballots all of a sudden. Oh, we have some mail-in ballots. It's amazing how those mail-in ballots are so one-sided, too. I know that it's supposed to be to the advantage of the Democrats, but in all cases, they're so one-sided.
Michigan and its 16 electoral votes also went to Biden. And at the end of the day, the unofficial electoral count stood at 253 for Biden and 213 or 214 for Trump, depending what you count or not. Something I forgot to add for how the American election works. These states that spend their state points towards one candidate or another, when they spend these points, the first candidate to 270 wins the White House. So you can see that it was at 253 for Biden and 2014, if we're being generous, for Trump. So Biden is getting closer on the Wednesday. Thursday, nothing much happened. There was some movement in some of the states that were counting, but there was a bunch of memes happening at the time. Like, there was people from Nevada putting up memes that saying, like, we're counting as fast as we can, stop yelling at us, and stuff like that. And I saw certain stuff at social media, but like, the reality is, like, these people had to open envelopes, check the contents, and validate them to make sure they were a registered voter and everything was counted, and then collect the vote and then upload it later. Like, with thousands of envelopes, it would take a lot of time to process these things, and it takes a lot of time to process.
Shit.
Yeah. So like,
a lot of envelopes.
When they were saying like, hey, we're counting as fast as we can, like, please get off our dick, like it was the reality. Like, there was more mail-in votes than ever before, and it was going to take a while.
And one of the things that isn't really talked about a whole lot right now is that in some of these states, Republican legislatures had specifically passed laws saying that you couldn't count the votes until election day. So those mail-in ballots that could have been sorted and counted weeks before now weren't able to be counted and sorted until election day. They basically had to sit in a warehouse for weeks at a time.
Because reasons.
And of course, like those letters sitting in a warehouse and then being transported to polling locations, those led to a whole bunch of bullshit rumors of like there's these mysterious vans that pull up in the middle of the night and drop off sacks of Biden votes. And it was just people taking the mail that had been securely stored to the place where it can be counted and registered. Not a
Is
conspiracy.
that like the messy bun blonde lady that was like the star witness about Democratic corruption?
Oh, I think at the end. I think at the end of this, we should watch a little montage from that.
And I signed something saying that if I'm wrong, I can go to prison. Did you?
She's very funny.
Rudy,
messy bun blonde lady,
star witness that was suspiciously intoxicated, I would say, or at least very excited.
Oh, I just noticed I have a video button. Does my video work? Yes, my video works. Oh yeah, and she was like yelling at that guy. I had to sign a piece of paper that said that if I was saying anything that wasn't true, I'd go to jail. Did you sign something? I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yes, it was amazing.
Never heard of that before.
She thought that was just like the spirit bomb finishing move. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we'll definitely review that when we get to the legal bullshit. So Friday the 6th, Biden caught a couple more states. Caught Pennsylvania. Georgia moved towards Biden. And then Saturday the 7th happened. As Trump's legal team, led by Rudy Giuliani, was setting up a press conference at a landscaping company. Richard, do you remember what happened?
The Four Seasons landscaping. Make America rake again.
Yes.
Yeah, so they typed in. I'm guessing this is how it went. Somebody typed in the Four Seasons, and then they found like, oh, this will work, and they say we can use their locations. They're expecting a ballroom of some fancy hotel, and it was a fucking landscaping company.
It makes
that about right?
Yeah, it makes me think of that scene with Robert Goulet in The Simpsons, where he lands and they're like, are you with the casino? And Bart's like, I'm with a casino. And he's like, good enough, let's go. You're with the Four Seasons? I'm from a Four Seasons. Good enough, let's go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, you from the casino?
I'm from a casino.
Good enough, let's go.
Oh, Giuliani. I don't need to make fun of Giuliani. Giuliani dunks on himself all
oh my god,
more than I could ever imagine.
Apparently he was cutting some pretty rank farts in the courtroom.
Yeah.
The answer that I gave you is they didn't bother to interview a single witness. Just like you, they don't want to know the truth.
Yeah, there's video, and you can
Probably
actually hear
on a
the
diet of cheese and disappointment.
and that's what happens.
Same, but
And this was post him being tricked into sleeping with somebody who was presented as underage by Sacha Baron
Yeah, Borat's daughter
he didn't sleep with her. He was
just tucking his shirt in.
Just
it was very, very sketchy.
Just tucking his shirt in.
But like the thing about this is like all this shit has kind of happened in like 8 weeks, like all of that happened over a span of like 8 weeks or 6 weeks or something like that.
Wait. You guys don't have a tiny coat hook on your taint? No?
Can't say as I do.
Well, now that you mentioned it.
Saturday the 7th, states go Biden's way, and they predict that he will win the election. Saturday the 7th puts him over 270 at 273. At the current date, it sits at 306 votes for Biden to Trump's 232, squarely putting Biden in the lead.
This will be a very, very strong case. And I know you won't accept it because of your hateful biases, but let's see if you can try thinking rationally. The poll? Because they don't decide the election. The call for Joe Biden isn't who was it called by? Oh my goodness, all the networks. Wow. All the networks. We have to forget about the law. Judges don't count. All the networks thought Biden was going to win by 10%. Gee, what happened? Come on, don't be ridiculous. Networks don't get to decide elections. Courts do.
And then all the conspiracy theories started erupting. Trump got on Twitter, and Rudy Giuliani's legal team, I'm going to say, with sarcasm, started applying lawsuits all over America. Miriam, would you like to go a bit more into that?
Oh my God, there were so many lawsuits. So he had about 50 lawsuits, and all of them except for one were withdrawn, denied, or dismissed. There are a few that are still active, where they're active in the sense that they're sitting on somebody's desk, not in that they're actually working on them and they're actively being argued in court.
They're waiting for a rubber stamp or a signature, eh?
Right. Definitely waiting for that rubber stamp saying that they won. But I mean, as of this point, it is 7:38 p.m. where I am right now, and all of the Electoral College votes have been cast, and Joe Biden has 306 votes to Donald Trump's 232. And this morning, one of the last lawsuits in Wisconsin was rejected, which was an appeal that he had lost earlier last week. But it was one of the last ditch lawsuits. Like, I'm appealing this decision. Your appeal is denied. This lawsuit is still dumb.
Yeah, to quote one of the paragraphs out of that one, it's, we conclude the campaign is not entitled to the relief it seeks. The challenge to the indefinitely confined voter ballots is meritless on its face, and the other three categories of ballots challenged fail under the doctrine of latches. So it was a solid roundabout kind of like fuck you to that.
There were so many lawsuits, and it's the problem with the lawsuits is that it's none of them were credible, but the whole point of them was just to kind of erode faith in the election system and kind of support this idea that there was fraud and irregularity in the election system and in all of the voting machines, like the Dominion voting machines. And even in court, a lot of times they were arguing, well, we don't have the fraud evidence with us. We're not saying there's fraud, but if you let us file this lawsuit, we'll have evidence that we can present to you. But
if you let us file this lawsuit, we'll make sure to create some evidence.
That's pretty much what it was. But
I also heard that, like, the way they behaved, like, in front of the press, like, and in front of, like, the media, like, they postured very, like, broadly, saying, like, oh, we'll have the evidence and we'll defeat this and we'll show that the deep belly is open and that fraud is, and then
that whole release the Kraken thing.
Oh my God, it was just fucking bizarre.
Because there's not a singular voter fraud in one state. This pattern repeats itself in a number of states. Almost exactly the same pattern. When it's being counted, almost invariably in the United States, up until the mass cheating that went on in this election, a Republican and a Democrat inspector, as well as others, if there are other parties, is allowed to watch the unsealing of this ballot. That could have been Mickey Mouse. That could have been a dead person. That could have been not filled out properly. That could have been the same person 30 times. That could have been, and all these things have happened, by the way. So, for example, the recount being done in Georgia will tell us nothing because these fraudulent ballots will just be counted again. Did you all watch My Cousin Vinny? You know the movie? It's one of my favorite law movies because he comes from Brooklyn. And when the nice lady who said she saw, and then he says to her, how many fingers do I got up? And she says, 3. Well, she was too far away to see it was only 2. These people were further away than My Cousin Vinny. I can't give you all these affidavits because if I do, these people will be harassed. They'll be threatened. They may lose their job. We have 100 more of these. I can't show them to you because those people don't want to be harassed. They don't want to have their lives torn apart by the goons on the other side. I think the logical conclusion is this is a common plan, a common scheme. It comes right directly from the Democrat Party, and it comes from the candidate.
What we are really dealing with here and uncovering more by the day is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections here in the United States. The Dominion voting systems, the Smartmatic technology software, and the software that goes in other computerized voting systems here as well, not just Dominion, were created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez. It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm that had been plugged into the system. And that's what caused them to have to shut down in the states they shut down in. That's when they came in the back door with all the mail-in ballots.
This is an opening statement. This is something where we have told you what the evidence will show, and we have given you a brief description. That happens in a courtroom all the time, where that's not the fact-finding process. That is just an overview.
I know this is a lot of information that we've given you, probably because we're frustrated with what we keep reading and hearing in the censored press, which is that we have no evidence, we have no specifics, we have no backup of what we're saying, and you largely ignore the affidavits that are filed. Whether you agree or disagree with an affidavit, it's evidence. If I were the government, like I used to be, there'd probably be a lot of people arrested by now.
This is very fucking bizarre.
It's so ludicrous.
Yes.
Well, one of the lawsuits they actually filed, I guess, referred to one of the plaintiffs as Spider, Spyder. And
pretty early 2000s.
Apparently,
okay.
Spider was to provide expert testimony, but like, what was it? Spider claims to be an electronics intelligence analyst with experience gathering SAM missile system electronic intelligence and extensive experience as a white hat hacker used by some top election specialists in the world. And yeah, basically, Spider does not disclose whether it's I guess the pronoun used is S/HE. So he, she, they don't know if it was male or female or what. I guess
I think they were just trying to hide that person's identity.
Okay.
So that's just common where you're trying to say like she or he.
They,
yeah. And so they're basically saying that this person, because they don't know who they are, they can't verify anything they said, and therefore, it's irrelevant. And it's also kind of like that whole Ron Watkins thing too.
Yeah, it's just the whole thing is ludicrous, and a lot of the lawsuits even were just repetitive, but they would be filed by different people. So I think Pennsylvania was the one where they had the most lawsuits. They had 18 lawsuits in Pennsylvania. And
because that was the one that cinched. That was the whoopsie. Yeah, because I that was the one that cinched the win for Biden, like on that Saturday's Pennsylvania, I believe.
People thought it was going to have to go to a recount because it was such a close squeeze, but the Pennsylvania law, I believe, said that it would go to a recount if it was within like 0.5% or 0.25% of difference. But Biden went past that, and he was like 1% beyond Trump, and so it never went to a recount. But a lot of them were just ridiculous lawsuits. They had some where they said that the extended mail-in ballot deadline was challenging in the Constitution of Pennsylvania, or that they wrongly allowed mail-in voters the chance to fix their ballots for Democrats, but not for Republicans. But then they couldn't prove that any of that actually happened. And they said that in some areas there wasn't access for observers to watch the vote, and then they couldn't prove that that happened either. In one of them, in the Philadelphia County one, where they said, oh, well, there was insufficient access by observers, they said, oh, well, I guess there was a non-zero number of people in the room. And the judge said, so what's the problem with that? You said there wasn't any. Yeah,
I love the non-zero number of people.
There was a non-zero number of people in the room affiliated with our campaign.
It could be one, it could be 2,000.
What's the problem? Why are you bringing this into my courtroom?
Yes.
Okay, there was another one that was brought to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court saying that there wasn't enough election observer access. Another one said that there was provisional ballots were wrongly allowed to cure their invalid mail-in ballot. And it said that some people were given notification that they could fix errors in their ballots, and that's just legally allowed.
May it please the court. My name is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm here on behalf of the plaintiffs.
Rudy Giuliani, who is spearheading President Donald Trump's legal fight to block President-elect Joe Biden from being certified as the winner of Pennsylvania, claimed at a hearing in federal court on Tuesday in Williamsport that allowed remote access to live audio that there was not only voting fraud in Pennsylvania, but that it was nationwide, offering no evidence to back up that claim.
The best description of this situation is it's a widespread nationwide voter fraud, of which this is a part.
Lawyers representing several Pennsylvania counties in the lawsuit called Giuliani's claims, quote, disgraceful.
I don't think that Mr. Giuliani has even read Judge Ranjan's opinion or even understands it. Mr. Giuliani is talking about another case, not the case before the honor, some invented case, some fantasy world. But the case before the honor, they removed all the proof allegations. Gone. I mean, this just is disgraceful in an American courtroom of any place.
Despite Giuliani's sweeping claims, the Pennsylvania lawsuit, which initially included claims that Trump campaign observers were denied access to ballot counting, narrowed the case to focus on an allegation that some voters were improperly allowed to fix or cure their ballots.
As far as we're concerned, Your Honor, those ballots could have been for Mickey Mouse.
The judge in the case appeared skeptical of the request to block officials from certifying the vote, saying that halting certification would effectively disenfranchise all voters in Pennsylvania.
At bottom, they're asking this court to invalidate more than 6.8 million votes, which we just heard about from counsel, thereby disenfranchising every single voter in the Commonwealth. Can you tell me how this result can possibly be justified?
The judge indicated he would not immediately rule on the case And as it unfolded, Pennsylvania's Supreme Court ruled in a separate lawsuit that the Elections Board in Philadelphia acted reasonably in keeping Trump campaign observers 15 feet away from counting tables, rejecting an appeal from Trump's campaign.
All right, thank you, counsel, very much. Thank you, Judge. All right, good night.
The big one that a lot of people talked about was one called Purkle versus Wolf. And that one was brought by, let's see, that was 4 plaintiffs, and they had generalized allegations of fraud based on complaints issued by third parties. And so this was 4 voters sought to block all votes from Pennsylvania, Montgomery, Delaware, and Allegheny counties from being included in the state total, claiming that the state violated the right to equal protection by allowing different absentee ballot practices among counties.
That's wild.
Yeah. None of that is true, by the way. But before the election, Pennsylvania's Secretary of the State, Kathy Boockvar, advised county election officials that curing absentee ballots, which is the term for fixing mistakes like a missing signature, was permitted but not required. As a result, local practices differed to a degree. The suit claims that it was unconstitutional to allow some but not all Philadelphia voters to cure their ballots. The suit also cites Delaware County for allegedly giving in-person ballots to voters who were recorded as having received mail-in ballots without requiring them to sign the registration book at the polls. In Allegheny County, according to the suit, voters were required to vote provisionally when records showed they had requested an absentee ballot but not cast it. So this one had a really interesting outcome because the law firm representing the Trump campaign, Porter Wright, actually asked to withdraw. And so Porter Wright is a really big national firm. And once Porter Wright withdrew, that was when Rudy Giuliani and I don't remember if Jenna Ellis got involved, because that's when all of the big national firms started jumping ship from these lawsuits. And one important thing to note about a lot of these state election laws is that the election system in the U.S. is really decentralized. So there's not like one governing body that governs every single election law for each and every state. Each state it has the authority to do their own election laws as they work for that state, and then each county administers them. And so it's pretty common for states to have some variation in local election practices, and you're allowed to have provisional ballots cast in different circumstances. So, for example, a lot of people were complaining about certain people going up to the polls and voting with like a utility bill. Well, in Texas, that's legal here too. So if I go up to the polls and I say, hey, my wallet got stolen and I don't have my driver's license, but I need to vote today, I can go up there with a utility bill and say, here, this is my utility bill. This has my name. This has my address. This is proof of residency. And I'll sign a provisional ballot and an affidavit saying this is who I am. This is a provisional ballot, casting my vote for the president, or this even works for a local election. It doesn't matter what kind of election it is. That allows me to vote. And then I can cure that ballot later once I get a photo ID. And then I'll go up to the I don't remember how exactly it works in Texas because I've personally never done this before, but it's an option for people who don't have a photo ID on them. This is just an example of how different elections officials work through these issues. Different states do that differently. So.
I've presented most of what I want to present. We're just kind of covering I think like the chaos afterwards, and so I guess
Yeah.
what more significant things should we mention, Miriam?
I mean, the lawsuits, I don't know if the lawsuits are going to take up a whole episode or not, because there are a lot of them, but the majority of them amount to about the same thing, where they're alleging fraud. There's no fraud that they can really substantiate, and there's not a lot to them. So aside from this one that I just talked about where Porter Wright withdraws, that's the main one where the big firms jump ship, and then that's where Rudy Giuliani steps in, and then after that is when everything turns into a big circus shit show.
So they almost had like the trappings of like legitimacy before. At least they were being represented by like legitimate firms. But even like when they jumped ship and Rudy took over, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia, unfortunately, and I can say this about my own city, has a reputation for voter fraud. You have a reputation for dead people voting, and we're going to go look at just how many dead people voted here. I didn't think we'd have to do that, but we will. And you have a reputation from Camden voting here. Wouldn't be the first time that happened. But this goes way beyond any of that. And let me also add that this isn't happening just here. We have exactly the same lawsuit in Wisconsin, where exactly the same thing happened. Except in Wisconsin, mysteriously at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, about 120,000 ballots appeared. Oh, here come these ballots. Well, we have no idea if they really are ballots. We have no idea if they're signed, if they're postmarked properly, if it isn't just the same person who submitted 100,000 ballots, and they all got counted. This is the way they intend to win. Now I'm informed by former Congressman Sweeney, who's been going around the country collecting this information, that similar situation in Arizona, similar situation in Nevada, and a similar situation, what am I missing, John? Where are you? In Michigan, in Detroit, Michigan. Again, let me be specific what it is. This whole new thing that never happened before in our country, these mail-in ballots, which has been a cause of real concern for everyone because they can easily be fraudulent. Well, one of the things that the law attaches to that is the right for both parties to observe the ballot, the way we do with absentee ballots. You make certain it's properly signed. On the outside, there's a signature. You make sure that it's properly postmarked. You make sure that it's properly addressed, and then you pass on it. A number of these are often challenged by the Democrat representative or the Republican representative. We never got a chance to look at a single one of them. They're not going to steal this election. This election gets decided by the people. These people, the elite, they don't care about the people. The people are the deplorables, the chumps. They're not important. To President Trump, he's the whole reason that he ran for office. And he's the whole reason for which he's carrying on this campaign, so that your vote can mean something, so that your vote doesn't get wiped out by 100,000 fraudulent, meaningless paper ballots that no one gets to observe. So we are going to continue the lawsuit here. We're going to bring a second one, and then we're going to bring a federal lawsuit. And we're going to take a very good look at whether we bring this nationally. We certainly are going to bring it here and in Wisconsin. Quite possibly, we'll do a national lawsuit and really expose the corruption of the Democrat Party. But this is beyond anything I've ever seen before. This comes when you think you have so much power and you own the media that you can do anything you want. Well, sorry, we're going to fight for the people. We're going to vindicate their right. And the ultimate result is President Trump has won.
Well, seeing as I'm recording this on January 10th, and we all know how bad it gets, let us return next time for the conclusion of this episode, where we go into the continued lawsuits that Donald Trump's legal team puts against the American election system. His phone call that turns into groveling, and no fucking shit. Now, because I'm recording this on the 10th, you know I'm not bullshitting. A real insurrection attempt. Like an attempted coup by MAGA hats. Tune in next time. But playing us out, here is Biden Won, an election freestyle rap by StrayDup. That's StrayDup. enjoy, and see you in the after show.
Biden got the most votes coming. Looking at the polls, got a boatload of it. Everybody talking, but they don't know nothing. Funny. Trump about to go home so broke from it like he froze on budget. Ozone busted. Police using chokeholds, no discussion. Time to get him shook like a snow globe, cousin. Flow so cold, hit the slow-mo button. Let me switch the gears and blow up the track like a grenadier. This election about to end careers. The rappers laughing about liberal tears. How's it feel? You probably embarrassed. Popping a bottle for Kamala Harris. Bet Donnie tripping now. Kick your mouth. Yeah, you a sore loser like a 7th grader. COVID hit, no ventilators. Russiagate, you did him favors. Say bye to Trump, we winning major. This second nature, no pen or paper. Fuck Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager. Put progressives in the Senate chamber. Better late than never, but we never waver. Blue wave on the roll. Who hating on Joe? Yo, you drunk off the Kool-Aid. Yo, you can't let it go. Unemployment high, inflation high, and GDP on the low. But Biden about to go fix that. You already know.
If you've been listening to OVPod, you've probably heard a couple songs by the musician Pepper Coyote on our program. He's the person that introduces himself when we play his tunes, and there's going to be another one of those upcoming on part 2 of this episode. But for this after show, I thought I'd give him the reins to continue in audio a rant he was having on Twitter about just how much celebration there is surrounding Trump getting banned from Twitter, and how it's not the victory you think it is.
Hey, Pepper Coyote here, and I'm mad about something. So they finally, after years of encouragement, tried to do a coup in the U.S. This is how things are meant to run. You're supposed to be happy about things are, and if you have a problem with it, you do a sine wave, and you do a chant, and you hope the cops don't kill you downtown. Our system is not equipped to deal with something like this. We all see the videos of the cops opening the doors for them. We see how few tear gas grenades are used, how National Guard has been brought into cities to shut up people protesting street executions performed by the police. But the feds are nowhere to be found when Washington, D.C. is under attack. This is not simply an issue with who's in charge, but the way things have been intentionally designed to work for the last 4 years and the 8 years before that, 8 years before that, and so on. People are desperate for help. People's lives are falling apart in the middle of the largest pandemic of our lifetimes, and over, we're told by our government on both sides that we do not need help, that we are simply not working hard enough, or that we picked the wrong career or the wrong degree, or that our problems are simply not worth solving. A lot of the people busting into the U.S. Capitol building are Q followers. QAnon is a magnet for sad uncles, rejected 20-somethings, and lonely grandmas alike, and no matter how much you hand-wave them away as rich LARPers with nothing better to do, they've elected reps in Congress that are just now taking office. Now. There are more QAnon sympathizers in Congress than there are socialists, and their policies will shape the next 2 years at least. Many of the 75 million people who voted for Trump, which was the most votes any Republican has ever received in a U.S. presidential election, are Q followers, or at the very least, suspect that this whole game is rigged. And they aren't really wrong on that. Millions and millions of people see that things aren't fair or equal, or that our economic system seems to be built on lies and exaggerations. The problem is they think the perpetrators are the cloud people or something, when really it's the capitalist ruling class, the same oppressor we've been fighting for 2 centuries. The Democrats do not offer an alternative. In the world of QAnon followers, the Dems pretend that nothing is wrong because they're secretly like part of the whole scheme and are the secret benefactors of everything. And the Republicans are kind of also in secret fighting against them. And if you look at that way, if you look at the way the Democrats have materially improved or changed the lives of your average American, I can see how this doesn't seem that insane. We voted so hard for Obama and all the change he was going to bring, and what we ended up with was slightly more people paying a stupid amount for health insurance, but at least they got health insurance. College debt, nothing. Housing crisis, nothing. Homelessness, nothing. Food access, you see what I'm going with here. The people whose lives sucked before Obama still have sucky lives because that is what the system is designed to do. It is not designed to help anyone achieve a dream, American or otherwise. It is set up to funnel money to the top. We can keep trying the same crap we've been trying since the turn of the century, or we can try helping people in a ways that helps them, not by renaming streets, not by changing rules a little bit, not by putting on a dashiki and kneeling for a photo, putting resources into the hands of people who need them. Not doing so dooms the country to another cycle where the people who feel unhelped and ignored by our economic system will vote in Trump's kid or whoever with 80 million votes, maybe 90. There is no future where we round up all the deplorables and put them in a camp. They are never going to disappear. I do think that offering a solution to their problems other than bootstraps will do more to further that goal than all the tweets in the world.